Welcome back, one and all, to the latest edition of the Future's So Right podcast. I'm your host, Pete Beal. This is a Green Flame Press production. Thank you so much for joining me. I am so glad to be back recording another episode. I'll just give a quick explanation for my prolonged absence. I had a really, really bad illness pretty much the entire month of March. And along with this illness came about 10 days where I was literally unable physically to speak at all. And it was just horrible. And even now I've been recovering for several weeks and I still don't feel like my voice is 100% back. Maybe you can tell, maybe you can't. But either way, I'm so grateful that you're here listening to the show today. I think this is going to be a fun episode. If you enjoyed the content today, please make sure you hit that thumbs up button. Consider subscribing if you want to be notified of future episodes. I try to do these a lot more frequently than I have been able to this month. So, like I said, we have a bit of a fun episode teed up for our return. I was thinking about what I wanted to do, and I have a few different topics that I've been working on putting together episodes for, but none of those were really feeling right. I wanted to do something, it's springtime, I wanted to do something kind of fun. So what I'm going to do today, I don't know how long this episode will end up being. Could be a short one, could end up being long, depending on how this goes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go out to Reddit, and I'm going to search for unpopular writing opinions, and I'm going to give my own thoughts and feedback on those opinions. Will I agree with them? Will I not? Will I think the people are idiots? Will I not? Let's find out, shall we? Let's stir up a little bit of controversy, have a little bit of fun. Maybe we'll find some stuff that's funny. Maybe we'll find some stuff that is honestly helpful in our writing process. Who knows? Who knows what we're about to discover? Please sit back, relax, maybe grab some popcorn for this one because I have a feeling this is going to be pretty entertaining. So, please enjoy the show. So right out of the gate, before we go any further, I want you to know I just went back and listened to the intro I just recorded, and I'm perfectly aware that my voice does not sound normal. Rest assured I'm not in any pain or anything like that recording this, so I hope it does not distract from your listening experience. I know my normal voice is ever so lovely to listen to. Who knows, maybe you'll prefer this version. So what I've done is I've come out to Reddit, and right now I am in the subreddit r writing, and I just searched for unpopular opinions. So I found a thread. This one's a few years old. We'll start with this one. What is your unpopular opinion about writing? And this, I'm not really a Redditor, so I'm not familiar with all the terms, but this thread starter or original poster decided to come right out of the gate, come out swinging, and this was their opinion. J.R.R. Tolkien was in desperate need of an editor or two, and it would have been gentlemanly if someone told him about the concepts of plotting and pace. Okay, so we're going to get started. Alright, this is where we're going. We're starting with this. Okay. I haven't made a secret of the fact that The Lord of the Rings is possibly my favorite fantasy series of all time. It is absolutely beautifully written. With that being said, it does pain me to say this, but there are segments of the books. It was really intended as essentially one massive book where pace is a bit of an issue. I will acknowledge that. That being said, I think we also need to look at this from the lens of the fact that these books were not written recently. I believe the concept for the story first occurred to Tolkien while he was fighting in World War One, and he spent, I believe it was roughly the next 30 or 40 years of his life actually writing the books. So holding him to the standards that we would hold a modern fantasy author to today, to me, at least in terms of plotting and pace, isn't 100% fair. If we're judging him by the standards of today's fantasy authors, I think this would be valid, but I don't think that's a fair thing to do. So that's just my 2 cents on that one. Not 100% wrong, but I think it just requires a little bit of context. Okay, let's move on to the next one. This is the one that received the highest amount of downvotes, and this is what they had to say. Too much of what's in these days is based on flimsy politics in the new era of good feelings. If you don't want to throw in essentially token characters, you will not be getting published. Okay. So let's assume that this person has no idea, for starters, that self-publishing exists, which essentially allows you to publish anything you damn well please. Let's break this down a little bit, though. Too much of what's in these days is based on flimsy politics in the era of good feelings. If you're going to make an argument like this, you really should be throwing in specific examples of what it is you mean. I hear a lot of people say this about just about any entertainment medium you can think of. Be that books, TV, movies, video games. There's a certain subset of people that seem to feel this way. Now, if you want this opinion to be taken seriously, you should be able to articulate exactly what you mean by that. This person didn't do that. Now, I agree you don't want to throw in, as they put it, token characters just for the sake of getting published. But I think what they're doing here, and I don't know this because, as I said, they didn't give us enough details, is they're assuming that any instance they see of perhaps representation of a minority group, for example, is essentially a token character. And I don't think that's a good way to look at things. You're assuming intent without knowing an author's feelings. And again, if you wanted this to hold up, you really should provide your own examples of what you mean by this, which I'm assuming is why this is probably the least popular opinion on this particular thread. Moving on to another unpopular opinion. This is actually a two-parter. This person put two different opinions, so I'll start with the first one first. There are entire genres without any merit that shouldn't exist. That's it. I'm not pausing for effect. That's the entire opinion. What I find funny about this is that somebody then asked them which ones they were referring to, and they then responded, however they later deleted their response. So unfortunately, I'm not able to tell you which genres are without merit and shouldn't exist. My response to this one is pretty simple. If there's even one person interested in reading this genre, then it has merit and it is worthy of existence. So that sums up my feelings pretty efficiently. I have to very staunchly disagree with that, at least without being able to see their response. Who knows, maybe there's some extremely strange genre that this person came across, but I guess we'll never know. Now, their second opinion isn't necessarily related to writing books or anything like that, but I find it kind of funny. They say, I also hate how you click on a thread here thinking it's going to be an interesting topic on writing, and it turns out the original poster dumped their entire life story in there. Well, you may hate that, but people posting on an internet website do not exist to tell you what you want to hear. They do not exist to create threads that you are going to find interesting. They're going to share what they find interesting. You might like it, you might not, but they're under no obligation to give you what you want. So, sorry. I won't say your username on here. I won't shame you like that, but they do not exist to serve you. All right, we have a 7-parter. This person has 7 unpopular opinions they want to put out into the world. So, starting from the top. Number 1. Dragons are boring in general. Any luster they might have had has been lost through countless repetition. What I'll say about this is I wouldn't say that dragons themselves are boring. What I will say is that the manner in which they have been written over the years has gotten repetitive, and that can lead to many people feeling that dragons are boring. The issue isn't the dragons, the issue is the way they're written. Some stories still manage to do them exceptionally well. I will agree that those are fewer and further between, though. So I'll give you a partial agreement on that one. Number 2. Prophecies were never a good thing. They were bad in Greek theater and they're bad now. No, your story is not the exception. I think speaking in absolutes is never a good idea when it comes to things like this, but for the most part, I agree with the sentiment behind this. I don't really care for the use of prophecies in stories, but I'm not going to sit here and say it's never a good thing because I can't possibly read every book in which this occurs. So, I will say that the majority of instances that I have read, it really wasn't a good thing. I'm just not willing to go to the step of saying never. Number 3. Medieval Britain/Europe is overused. Why not create a fictional society inhabited by a fictional race of humans in a fictional culture with fictional religious beliefs and technology? Well, I can't argue it's overused. I think you might need to branch out a little bit more. There are a lot of authors doing exciting things in completely fictional worlds with completely fictional cultures. Maybe you just need to expand your horizons a little bit on this one, but I've never had any issue finding books created in purely fictional societies. Number 4. Influences from anime and video games have created a generation of damaged writers who have been nursed on shallow action plots created by overworked, underrested manga artists pumping out contents for content's sake with little regard for quality or pacing. I can't get there. I'm sorry, I can't agree with you on this one. I think you might just be reading the wrong books if this is how you feel. I can't deny that stories like that do exist, but a generation of damaged writers, to me, that's just, it's too broad of a brush that you're painting with. There are so many talented authors out here that are putting out wonderful work, and I think dismissing them as a generation of damaged authors who have little regard to quality or pacing is at best an oversimplification and at worst just generally insulting. Number 5. Oh boy. Here we go. Social justice warrior propaganda has likewise created a new generation of damaged writers. Here we go with that again. Too paranoid to include the diversity they supposedly crave. Is it offensive to disabled people to have an antagonist with a prosthetic limb? Good grief. There's a lot to unpack with this one. I'll just reiterate the same point that I made with their last opinion, which is painting with a very broad brush and saying there's a whole generation of damaged writers is just generally not a good thing. So they're essentially claiming that this social justice propaganda has created writers who are too afraid to include diversity they crave. And the example they give is they feel it's too offensive to disabled people to have an antagonist, aka a villain or a bad person in their book with a prosthetic limb. Maybe people are legitimately asking this person these questions. I've never had anyone ask me these questions. I've read several books where the antagonist is disabled, so I really can't agree with this. And these aren't old books, they're recent. I personally, as a younger author, I'm in my young 30s, new to doing this overall, I wouldn't hesitate to have a character with a disability in any of my work, even an antagonist. I would obviously make the effort to do it tastefully and to not, be insulting towards the disabled community by my writing, but I don't feel like there are a ton of people out here who are going to get horribly offended by something as simple as the antagonist of a book having a prosthetic limb. So, good grief indeed. Number 6. Most, 90% of world building should take place as you write the story. If you spend more than a week daydreaming about the setting before you write the first chapter, you're doing it wrong. If you have more words on the page about the setting than words on the page containing the story itself, you're just taking the piss. Okay, I wouldn't put it like that, but I kind of agree with the second part of that statement. I do feel, especially in maybe the fantasy and science fiction genres, that authors can get carried away writing about setting. I'm not disagreeing with that. I do disagree to a point about where they said most world building should take place as you write the story. I certainly wouldn't go as high as 90%. That's just my style, though. I feel it's good to have certain things in place before I start writing so that I don't have to figure them out later on in terms of my world building. So that's a difference in technique. I do agree, though. Like I said, some authors do get carried away about setting. Just because I like to do a little world building in advance doesn't mean I want to sit there and write pages and pages about setting. It's more so that I can set the right tone for the story. And so I don't get stuck later on trying to figure things out that I should have already had in place. Last opinion, number 7. Women writers do not have a better understanding of the opposite sex than men do. The mistakes they make when writing males are different than the ones men tend to make when writing women, but still just as noticeable. This varies a lot from writer to writer, but overall I can't disagree all that strongly. Yes, women writers do make certain misunderstandings when writing male characters at times, just like male authors do when writing female characters. Are they better at writing the opposite sex than men? That's a tough one. Yeah, I can't get with them in terms of they're just being too general. There's so many writers out there. There are women writers out there who do outstanding jobs of writing the opposite sex. There are male authors out there who do an outstanding job of writing the opposite sex. I can't sit here and say one is better than the other. I can't even say one is equal to the other. There's too many different examples out there. But I do agree that women writers do make mistakes when writing men. Sometimes the lack of understanding does show rather obviously. Sometimes it is rather noticeable. So I can't disagree with most of their point there. Thank you to this user for such a long stretch of content to react to. Okay, so since we got a pretty good sample size from that thread, what I've done now is I've moved to a newer thread. And what I would like to do is sort of see, are the opinions similar or are they different? This is much newer. It came 10 months ago, asking for what are your controversial writing opinions. Once again, I've sorted this so we have the bottom, let's call them the bottom feeders first, and we are going to open up with a deleted account. They have a controversial opinion, and they're declaring that right out of the gate. Here we go. This is their saying. Diversity is stupid. It's like dictating a Japanese author with a story set in Japan that the world is not and never will be just a bunch of Japanese people. If you're a white European, it's not unusual to grow up in a white community. Most stories have few main characters anyway. It's perfectly normal to choose a protagonist and a love interest and an antagonist of the same race and sexual orientation. Most other minor characters can be of different characteristics, but they are often not so fleshed out. Thus, to fulfill those nonsensical demands, it's often a diverse, in quotes, best friend or sidekick, which is often criticized from the same people who demanded the diversity in the first place. We're still going, this is a long one. Diversity is stupid because it doesn't mean anything. You could have a room full of white men, a Christian, an atheist, a Jew, a capitalist, a communist, and whatnot, and it would be full of conversation and conflict and thus interesting. Or you could have a room full of non-white men and women and whatever who have the same opinions about everything. And LGBT is overrepresented in fiction. People these days believe that gays are 30% of the population when they are less than 10 because of overrepresentation. So it's a moot point, trans also. Okay. Lot of thoughts there. On the most simple, basic level, I have to come right out and say, in regards to their overall premise, I do not believe, quote, diversity is stupid. These arguments just don't make a lot of sense to me. I I can only speak for myself, but I don't write my stories in a way where I'm trying to, as they put it, fulfill nonsensical demands regarding diversity. What I do try to do is create a fleshed out, realistic world with characters of a variety of backgrounds and different life experiences, because to me that feels real. Now, my books are set in a fantastical setting, but to me, even if I was writing a book in the real world, I would want it to feel real. Now, they make an interesting point that a Japanese author setting a story in Japan could be just a bunch of Japanese people. Okay, that's not necessarily wrong, but that's a very specific example. I think this really comes down to your individual story, but I think just painting with this broad brush that all diversity is stupid and it's nonsensical and we're forcing it in every story is just simply nonsense. For example, if you have a story set among a group of friends in modern day New York City, for example, I don't think having a diverse cast of characters from a variety of backgrounds, ethnicities, sexual orientations, etc., is going to feel like forced diversity. Um, as for LGBT being overrepresented in fiction to the point where people believe gays are 30% of the population, I think that's just nonsense, to be honest. I think overrepresentation is just simply, it's just a ridiculous term. I don't think you can really have any such thing as overrepresentation of any group. If you don't want to read these particular stories, nobody has a gun to your head making you do it. I don't think books involving LGBT characters are causing people to believe statistics that aren't true or anything like that. Overall, I have to say I can see why this is the most heavily downvoted uh, comment in this thread. I honestly don't find anything here that makes any sense to me. So, sorry, I don't think your opinion is controversial. I think the statements you're making are flat out incorrect. As much as I hate to do this, I'm going to touch on that last one again because I just read a response that they made to another Redditor who came out and essentially told them what I just expressed to all of you, that their opinion doesn't make much sense. Here we go again. You're missing the point. The original post was demanding diversity as a norm for fiction. It's telling people what to do. You shouldn't tell a Japanese writer what to write, and in the same way, you shouldn't tell a white man from wherever what to write. If you grew up or live in a white community, you can write about that. You can write about a group of friends of straight white people. You can write whatever you want. It's quite common to write what you know and especially what you desire. I get more out of a straight romantic subplot than a gay one. I desire a partner who has a similar appearance. I despise the bully from school I went to in my community. Okay, so since they want to continue this nonsense, I will just touch on this again. They say, this is about telling people what to do. You shouldn't tell a Japanese writer what to write, and you shouldn't tell a white man what to write. Who exactly is telling you what to write? I am a white man, and nobody has ever told me what to write. People can have their opinions about what is good or bad, what they like or don't like. That does not equal telling you what to write. You should write what you want. There's nothing wrong with that. However, you also have to understand that just writing what you want may be a good experience for you. That doesn't mean that people are necessarily going to like it. They have that right. They're under no obligation to like your work just because that's what you wanted to write. And they have no right to tell you that you have to write the story they want you to. It works that way, see? Okay, I need to take a break soon because I'm sure you could tell my voice is really starting to go, but I just wanted to touch on that a little bit more because I saw their response and I don't understand where they're getting at. I will just sum it up like this. Write whatever you want to write. You don't have anyone telling you that you have to write certain things. However, understand that if your writing perhaps doesn't include members of a certain community, then members of that community and other people may not necessarily care for your writing. You can have your opinions, they can have theirs. They can't tell you what to write, and you can't tell them what to like. Does that make sense? Good. Alright, so I was able to take a little break, and we are ready to get back to it. I went ahead and scrolled past a few because, to be honest, we had about 5 or 6 in a row that were basically rehashings of what we just went over. Either about political correctness or wokeness, and I think we've covered that pretty thoroughly at this point. So Let's move on to something else. This person has a list of things that they want to cover. So here are their controversial opinions. I'll go down the list. Number 1, Save the Cat is a cancer that destroyed the movie industry and is well on its way to doing the same to books. If you're not clear on what this means, I believe they are referring to the book Saves the Cat Writes a Novel, which a lot of people use as sort of a guideline when it comes to writing their books. I did read this book, and frankly, I didn't find it to be for me. The techniques within, I personally wouldn't use its techniques, but if they are helpful to you, I don't think it's a bad thing to use it. I think calling it a cancer that destroyed the movie industry and is going to destroy books is a little bit melodramatic, to be honest. Books are good or books are bad, and one sort of guidebook or writing guide is not going to change that. That's my thoughts on that. Their next opinion is brief and to the point. No one wants to read your memoir. Okay. I'm a part of a few writing groups, and I do see quite a few people come into those groups and ask for advice for writing their memoirs, and these tend to not draw a lot of interest. However, there are people that do enjoy reading memoirs. Now, I agree that there's not going to be a huge demand for just some person who's not particularly well known to write a memoir and draw a large audience. However, it's fully possible that over time this person could build interest and end up drawing a readership to their memoir. I think the generalization, no one wants to read your memoir, is a bit too much. So, I guess that's a little controversial, although it seems like a bit of low-hanging fruit too. So, description for its own sake is beautiful and should be encouraged. No, no, you are incorrect. Your opinion is wrong and you should be ashamed of yourself. That's maybe a little bit harsh, but I can't get behind this. We should just be describing things for the sake of describing them. Now, you can describe things to set a scene. You can describe things to pull the reader into your novel, make them feel like they're in the scene themselves, they're standing there with your characters. But just describing for its own sake, as you put it, for no other reason, no, I don't agree with you. I could see, yeah, that's controversial. No. Now, going into this next one, I'm not surprised to see this one from you. People who skip sections when they read can go die in a fire. Maybe if certain authors didn't spend page after page describing things for the sake of describing things, people wouldn't feel the need to skip sections. Just gonna throw that out there. Finding the deeper meaning of a book is palmistry for people with English degrees. I'm assuming you're taking a shot at the legitimacy of palmistry here. Okay. I never enjoyed when I was in school and such when English teachers would make us search for the deeper meanings of a book. Just let me enjoy the frickin' story. So I'm kind of with you on this one. Everyone can take what they wish from a story. What it means to me might not be the same as what it means to you. If your story has a moral, what you're making isn't art. It's propaganda. Yeah, I'm gonna say no again. Sorry, you can have a moral to your story without spewing propaganda. What if the moral of the story is to be kind to each other? Is that spewing propaganda? You'd probably say yes to that question, so I'm just not gonna go any further. Next opinion. Minimalism is for cowards. That's strong, and considering the rest of your opinions, not all that surprising. I'm not really a fan of minimalism as a writing style, but for certain stories, I suppose it could work. I, I don't consider I don't consider people who write using minimalism to be cowards. In fact, I think if it's someone who does it well, it's quite a skill set to have. It's not everybody is capable of writing an effective story using minimalism. Show, don't tell is a set of training wheels you should try to grow out of as quickly as possible. I'm not entirely sure exactly where you're heading with this. I agree that maybe necessarily we focus a little bit too much on always show, don't tell, show, don't tell, show, don't tell. But when you say you should grow out of it, I'm not really sure exactly what you mean by that. And considering, again, some of your opinions higher up, I'm a little worried about what you might mean by that. So overall, I'm going to guess that I probably don't agree with this opinion, even though I don't fully understand where you're going with it. That was the last of that person's opinions. I just want to point out the funny fact that the very first comment on their opinion says, I sense I wouldn't enjoy reading your work and you wouldn't enjoy mine. So I kind of feel the same way as that person. Your opinions are valid. Some of them I consider a little bit controversial. Most of them I disagree with, respectfully. I think I'm going to read one more person's list of opinions, and then I think we're probably going to wrap this up. This has been a lot of fun, though. I've enjoyed this. If you've enjoyed this episode, please let me know down below if you want to hear more of these types of episodes, and if there's something in particular you would like to hear a reaction to, make sure you let me know. So, here we go. This person has 5 quote-unquote controversial opinions on writing. Number 1. The more point of views your story has, the worse it is likely to be. Stop attempting to write the next Game of Thrones, especially you amateurs constantly seeking validation with thinly veiled "is it okay if I" questions. I don't know how much of a correlation there is between the number of point of view characters and a story's quality. You bring up the Game of Thrones example, say stop trying to do it. Those books obviously have a lot of point of view characters, and honestly, it's my personal theory that the number of point of view characters is the reason it's been, like 12 years since we've gotten one of those books. I think poor George has sort of written himself into a corner with those. So you are, I will say, making things harder for yourself if you have a bunch of point of view characters. But that doesn't necessarily mean the book is going to be bad. It's obviously not a guarantee that it's going to be good, but I don't know that you can necessarily determine quality based on number of point of view characters. You could certainly determine the amount of difficulty you're setting yourself up for, though. Opinion number 2. A good chapter length is around 3,000 to 7,000 words on average. A good book length is 80 to 100,000. Is this supposed to be controversial? Because I don't really find this one controversial. I think a good book is as long as it needs to be. That's really all I have to say there. If it's 80 to 100, that's great. If it's 250, that's great. If it's 50, that's great. My chapters tend to fall between 3,000 and 5,000 words. A few are a little longer, a few are a little shorter. I don't think I've ever really come close to 7,000. To me, that's probably a little bit on the long side, but teach their own. Mine tend to come in right around the 80,000 word mark, so it would be pretty stupid of me to disagree with that. But I just don't find it controversial. Sorry. Try to be a little edgier. Come on. Number 3. You will never be good enough to muck with the rules of writing. Take this as you will. How do you take this? I don't know how I take this. Okay. I never really had much interest in, quote, mucking, M-U-C-K, with the rules of writing, so is this something a lot of people are trying to do? If it is, I guess I'm just living under a rock or something. Number 4. Okay. I'm going to disagree with you on this one. Never start with a trilogy. Always start with a standalone, singular novel for a story. No. Start with whatever you damn well please. You do you. Do what's best for you. Don't listen to this person. Number 5. Most sex and fight scenes are narratively and developmentally pointless, the former more so than the latter. I have seen. I kind of agree with this one, and it's part of the reason I did an episode on fight scenes a while back. Make sure you check that out. If you were subscribed, you've probably already heard it. So there's that. But one thing I discussed was making sure your fight scenes fit into the narrative of your story and serve a purpose to the general overall story. And I think sex scenes, it's very much the same. So I don't know if most people would consider that controversial. Some people would probably disagree with you that most of them are pointless. So, you know what? I'm going to give you an agreement on this one. I'd say this is a little bit controversial, and I'm feeling you. I like it. I know I said we were going to wrap it up, but I'm having some fun, so let's do a little bit more. This person has one. Um, I don't know if this person understands the definition of the word controversial. Their controversial opinion is character driven stories will always be better than plot driven stories. I 100% agree with this opinion. I do not think this opinion is controversial. I think if you were to poll 100,000 readers, I think the vast majority are going to agree with you. To me, the best stories are ones where characters and character development and character growth are what end up driving the plot. So, again, I just don't find your opinion to be controversial, with all due respect. But I agree with it, so take that for what it's worth. Here's another little quick hitter. It sort of ties into a little bit of what we were talking about earlier, but stop telling me what my art should look like. Nobody's telling you what your art should look like. Make the art you want and be proud of it. Okay, this person has 3 quick hitters. Outlining is overrated. No, I disagree. Outlining is very much helpful with your next opinion here, which is doing a shitty first draft as fast as possible is a bad idea. I agree with that, which is why I outline. When I outline, I write better first drafts. Your 2 opinions here are sort of clashing with each other, in my opinion. And then you also say the 3-act structure sucks. I can't imagine people try to use it to build books. This is sort of piggybacking a little bit off the Save the Cat thing earlier. A 3-act structure can work for certain books. Each book is its own animal, but overall I agree. I couldn't write with a 3-act structure. They wouldn't work for my stories. So they suck for me, but they might not necessarily suck for other people. Okay. Well, we've sort of fallen into, I'm scrolling through this, and now it's pretty much just people arguing about diversity and such. But I found one last set of opinions that I would like to read and react to, and then we will wrap this up. Don't preach to your audience, or if you do, do it subtly. Nobody likes being lectured. If they wanted that, they'd go find someone to think for them. Let the audience think for themselves. Agree. Very much agree. I don't know how controversial this is because I don't think there are, for example, I don't think you're going to take Neil Gaiman's masterclass on writing and he's going to be sitting there saying, make sure you're preaching to your audience, or however he talks. You know, is anyone out there advising you to preach to your audience? Yes, you should let your audience think for themselves. It's sort of silly to call that controversial. Stop trying to copy other writers. If your reader wanted to read a book by that author, they'd read that author's story. Taking inspiration from another author is fine, though. Again, I very much agree with this. Again, I don't find this controversial. Write something you would want to read. That's a great idea because you're going to be reading this stupid thing about 80 times before you get to publish it, so make sure you like reading it. Very much agree. Again, I don't think they're like arenas full of people yelling, make sure you write something you don't want to read. So, again, the point is controversial opinions. Give me some controversy. There are no set rules for how to make an entertaining story. Every member of the audience will have different tastes. Yes, 100% agree. And I have seen, I'll give you this one because I think we've fallen into a trap where maybe a lot of people are starting to think there are set rules for how to make an entertaining story. Maybe that's a little too harsh way of putting it, but I think I know where you're getting at with this, and I agree with you. So, respect. I agree with that one. Oh, I just want to read one more. I just happened to scroll and see this one. Amazon's ability to self-publish is hurting the novel industry, and we shouldn't so easily encourage people to self-publish. No, you are scum. You are incorrect, deleted account. You are incorrect about that. If only people who the big publishing houses wanted to be published were published, we would be living in a very boring era of literature. Sorry, it's the truth. I'm not saying there are no good traditionally published books out there. There's tons of them. They're amazing. But I think part of that is because the self-publishing arm of the industry is helping to push different genres in exciting new directions. So yes, there are some bad self-published books out there. There's also bad traditionally published books out there. And I don't think self-publishing is hurting the novel industry. It's just giving people more to choose from. As this person on here said, that's kind of like saying YouTube hurt the movie industry. I think it's just kind of silly. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this up, but before we do, I found one last controversial writing opinion, and this one comes from somebody who actually understands the definition of the word controversial. This user's opinion is very short, very to the point. Fiction is terrible. Just let that sink in for a sec. Nothing else to that one. No specifics, just generally all fiction is terrible. I've tried to be polite here, but I think your opinion is terrible and so are you. So, with that, dear listeners, I think we will bring this to a conclusion. Again, I'll apologize if my voice seemed a little bit off throughout parts of this episode. Still getting on the road to recovery from my illness. Expect another episode within the next 2 weeks or so. I'm going to try to record a few episodes here in a sort of rapid succession, so I have a few teed up and ready to go for you. Any comments, questions, feedback, topic suggestions are always welcome. The website's petebeal.com. Check it out. You'll find the full list of our past episodes. And you will also find a form where you can submit questions, comments, concerns. You'll also find another form where you can submit to be a guest of the podcast if you would like. You're an author or somebody in the publishing industry that wants to sit down and have a conversation. I would love to talk to you. Last reminder, if you enjoyed the content, please hit that thumbs up button. Please subscribe to be notified of future episodes. And if you enjoyed this particular episode, I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. I would also love to hear if you have a controversial writing opinion and you feel bold enough to put it out there. Let's see if you have anything more controversial than the ones we have read today. Okay, that's all I've got for you today. Until next time, please stay safe, stay healthy, stay creative, and always keep writing. Thank you very much for tuning in.